Good morning. This week is the Parsha of Savo. In it, we're going to learn about the fascinating mitzvah of Bikurim, the mitzvah to bring the first ripened fruits as a special offering in the Beis HaMikdash. So the way it would work was that a farmer living in Eretz Yisrael, after a fruit from one of the 7 species from the Zayin Minim has ripened, he would, as the Mishnah says, he would go down to the field, he would tie a string around it and designate and say, this is going to be Bikurim. This is the special offering that they will bring to the Beis HaMikdash. And it was a great celebration with much fanfare and music. They would travel from their village, their town, from city to city, be great rejoicing and celebration. They would make their way to the Beis HaMikdash. Then they would come to the Beis HaMikdash and bring it to the Kohen. And there's an entire section that discusses the whole ritual, how it was done. The Kohen would put his hand under, they would put the fruits were in this special basket, and they would wave it together. And then this farmer would make a declaration. He would talk about how many, many years earlier, his ancestors, they struggled through many difficult times, and Hashem saved them. He recounts the story of the Exodus, how his ancestors in Mitzrayim, they suffered greatly, but they were liberated by Hashem. And here I am today, I'm proud. After all of these years, we trekked through the desert. We've made it, we've survived, and now I'm so grateful, I'm so appreciative of everything that I have, and here I am, I'm giving this gift to Hashem. In fact, this section of the declaration, what this farmer pronounces, is actually the basis of the Haggadah, which we discuss and analyze and recite on the night of Pesach at the Seder, is based on these verses here in the beginning of Parsha Savo. So ultimately, one of the great themes of the mitzvah of Bikurim is about thanksgiving, about appreciation, showing our gratitude to Hashem, which is a very, very important principle. It's a very important lesson to know, to be able to say thank you when someone does something for you, because naturally, people are not necessarily that way. Oftentimes, people are what Rashi mentions over here is kafui toiv. People are ungrateful for the good things that happen to them. If we go throughout human history, all the way to the very, very first person, Adam HaRishon, which Hashem gave him a wife to help him and assist him, the mother of his children, and yet, in the aftermath of the story, the Eitz Hadas, when Hashem said, Adam, what's going on? What happened? Why have you eaten from the tree of knowledge? What does Adam say? It is the Isha, this woman that you gave me. She enticed me, she convinced me, and that's why I ate from the Eitz Hadas. And over here Rashi says, here Adam was kafui toiv. He was not appreciative. He right away throws his wife under the bus because he didn't appreciate the fact that Hashem gave him all the good things. So oftentimes in life, people could do many, many things. We assist people, we help them in many different ways. We schlep, we go out and we do all kinds of things for them. And instead of receiving a thank you, oftentimes there's complaints, there's criticism. And indeed, we know it's psychologically, it's the missing tile syndrome. Oftentimes when we see many, many good things, we somehow focus and we fixate on that which is missing, that which is lacking. And the Torah, to counter this notion, this character, this natural disposition that people have, the Torah instructs us to be able to be constantly appreciative of the things that we have in our life, to look at all the blessings, all the good things, which sometimes could be challenging, and certainly when things are stressful, when things are challenging financially, emotionally, and health-wise, and in other areas of life, it could be very, very challenging to do that. But the Torah wants each and every one of us to pause every once in a while and to cultivate within ourselves this ability to look at the positive, the blessings, the good things that we have in life. And through this, when we say thank you, we condition ourselves to be that more appreciative. So that's one of the ideas. In fact, we know that the Rebbe would oftentimes tell his Hasidim that whenever you need something, of course, the Rebbe is the address and you should write in. And the Rebbe once mentioned, more than once in fact, that he sees that by Hasidim, whenever they need something, they're always writing in, they're writing their pan, they're writing their letters for assistance, for guidance, for brachas, and they only when things are bad, when things are going wrong, the Rebbe hears from them. But sometimes afterwards, when things go well or when the bracha materializes, he doesn't hear from them. And the Rebbe says, why am I the address to come with all the complaints and when things are not going well, but the besuris toivos, the good tidings, the good news, they don't tell me about? And the Rebbe actually once said that if these people who constantly are writing to him about the negative things, if they would write about the positive things, perhaps the other negative things wouldn't have to happen. Because if you're constantly focusing on the positive and talking about the good news, maybe the negative and not such good things that are happening in their lives, they wouldn't be prone to that as much. So certainly if we focus on the positive and we highlight and underscore the good things, then that sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, becomes a virtuous cycle where that continues to be reinforced and continues to strengthen our appreciation for those things that we have in life. That's one of the ideas behind the mitzvah of Bikurim. But today we're going to talk about the obligation. When exactly? We know you have to bring Bikurim in Eretz Yisrael from the Shivas Aminim, from the 7 species which Eretz Yisrael was praised and enhanced with. But when exactly did this obligation commence? When did it begin? So Rashi, in his commentary on this pasuk, he says that in the wording of the Torah says like this: "V'haya ki Savo yala will come to pass, will happen when you will enter the land which Hashem is giving to you as an inheritance. V'yirishta v'yeshavta ba. You will settle in the land. You will inherit the land and you will settle it." Which means that when they entered Eretz Yisrael, there were all these enemies that were at the time inhabiting the land. So they had to conquer the land, and then they had to divide it, allocate it to all the various tribes. So Rashi takes what would possibly be the simple explanation, because, why does the Torah have to even say v'yirishta v'shavta? Of course, you can't bring the Bikurim unless you're in the land and you have the fruits, or you have the wheat or the barley, whatever you have from the 7 species. You could only do that when you're in the land. So why does the Torah have to say v'yirishta v'shavta ba, that you will inherit the land and you will settle in it? You'll take possession of it. Why is that relevant? So Rashi says that in fact the duty to bring Bikurim only commenced when they have completely settled the land, which means it took 14 years. Upon entry of the land, it took 7 years for them to conquer the entire territory of Eretz Yisrael, and then it took another 7 years for them to divide it amongst all the 12 tribes. So it was a 14-year period from when they entered until the land was completely allocated and distributed to all of Bnei Yisrael. Rashi is saying that is only when the obligation to bring Bikurim, that it only began at that point. That's the opinion of Rashi. There's an opinion of the Sifri. The Sifri is a halachic medrash commentary on the Torah, on the Sefer of Bamidbar and Devarim. The Sifri says, "V'haya ki Savo yala aretz," it will be when you'll enter into the land. Ein v'haya ela miyad. The Torah is saying that immediately upon entering Eretz Yisrael, the obligation kicks in. So Rashi is saying it takes 14 years. It is only then when the obligation began. The Sifri says right away. The big question many of the Mefarshim, many of the commentators ask on the Sifri, who says that the obligation began right away, the Torah seems to reject specifically, explicitly, that opinion. As we said, the verse says, the very first verse of this week's parsha says, it will be when you'll enter the land which Hashem is giving to you as an inheritance, you'll take possession, and you will settle. How could you say that it begins, that the Bikurim offering is right away, if they have to first take possession and settle in the land, which took a substantial period of time? There are various Mefarshim that try to answer this question. Some say that the Sifri is not referring to the miyad, the fact that they have to, the fact that Torah says miyad, you have to, the fact that the Sifri says miyad is not referring to Bikurim. You don't have to bring the Bikurim right away. He's referring to the conquering and the possessing of the land. A separate idea. As soon as you enter the land, you should right away engage in the conquering and dividing of the land. Others say that he's the miyad when he says that the obligation actually does refer to Bikurim, but miyad doesn't mean as soon as you enter. It means as soon as you finish dividing and conquering, it right away kicks in, as opposed to other mitzvahs when they entered, such as appointing a king or annihilating Amalek, which weren't right away. The Torah says it's at a later stage, when V'haya b'haniach Hashem Elokecha, when you have relief from all of your enemies, which was a subsequent period of time. In any case, there are various explanations what the Sifri is saying, but the Rebbe in his talk, when he explains the Sifri and Rashi, rejects all of these attempts, because ultimately the Sifri seems to be very straightforward. He seems to be talking about the mitzvah of Bikurim, and he says miyad right away. The Sifri seems to suggest clearly that the duty, the obligation began right away. So we need to understand these two opinions. Why is it better for it to be right away? How does the Sifri reconcile the simplistic meaning of the pasuk, which seems to suggest that it was at a later period? And we also have to understand Rashi and what was their point of contention. So on one level, you can say that Rashi and the Sifri, as to whether you should bring the Bikurim immediately or at a later period of time, generally speaking, there were many, many mitzvahs that were specifically associated with Eretz Yisrael, whether it was Truma, Meiser, the agricultural mitzvahs, and other mitzvahs that are specifically bound and hinge on living in Israel. Rashi understands that Bikurim, like all other mitzvahs, refers to when the collective. When we say you have entered the land of Eretz Yisrael, we're referring to the collective, not just the specific individual Jew. When all of the Bnei Yisrael have entered, that is when the mitzvah of Bikurim begins. So therefore, it would only make sense that it was after the 14 years, the 7 years of the conquering, the 7 years of the dividing, it would make sense that at that period of time, we would say that the mitzvah has initiated, has commenced. The Sifri would say, no, the mitzvah of Bikurim is an individual mitzvah. It's something that is incumbent upon every single individual. When they have a ripened fruit, and at this point they're in the situation, they're settled in their personal property, they have to bring the mitzvah, irrespective of what's going on around them. And therefore, the Sifri says miyad, right away. So v'yirishta v'shavta, which the Torah is referring to, according to the Sifri, is not when all of the Jewish people have settled the land. It's v'yirishta v'shavta, when you have entered the land, is at this point you need to step up and bring your Bikurim to the temple, to the Beis Hamikdash. There's a whole other discussion about the Sifri, and perhaps we'll talk about it later. But one of the big questions we have is on the opinion of Rashi, and that is, as we mentioned before, the entire process of the Bikurim was ultimately a demonstration of a person's heartfelt appreciation and gratitude for all the miracles, for all the amazing things that Hashem did for the Bnei Yisrael throughout history, from the very beginning, as a formation of the tribe of the Bnei Yisrael when they were in Mitzrayim, all the way till this point, or it actually goes back earlier. Arami Ovid Avi goes to the time of when their ancestor Yaakov. So the whole point is to show their gratitude and appreciation. And Rashi is saying that you could have a scenario where when they entered Eretz Yisrael, it took 7 years to conquer it. Okay. And then it took another 7 years to divide it. But you would conceivably have a person who, after conquering the land, settled. Even though it took many, many years for others, so a person was living in the north or in the south or wherever he was living, he may have settled the land. He had grown a crop. He had figs. He had olives. He had some fruit from the Shivas Haminim. And now it's ripe. Theoretically, he could go to the Beis HaMikdash and offer his thanksgiving, offer his appreciation to everything, all the goodness that Hashem bestowed upon him, all the bounty and the amazing things that he has. But no, he's not going to do that because there is some other Jew on the other side of the country who he doesn't know who he may have never met, he doesn't know who it is, but that person hasn't conquered or settled in his land, and therefore that person hasn't arrived, hasn't v'yarishta v'shavta, but hasn't taken possession and settled it. So according to Rashi, it seems strange. At the end of the day, if you have arrived, you have your land, you have your figs, you have your dates, you have to say thank you. In fact, as we said before, the whole idea, Rashi says, of bringing the Bikurim is that you shouldn't be a kafli toiv, you shouldn't be an ingrate, you shouldn't be someone who is just self-absorbed and enjoying everything that Hashem gives you without saying thank you. So why would such a person have to wait, or why should they wait for all of these years? Because there's some other person on the other side of the country who has not settled in their land. And here, the Rebbe explains, this brings out the depth and the beauty of the camaraderie and the unity of all of the Jewish people. One of the key components and features of the offering of the Bikurim is that it needs to be done in a state of simcha, of joy, happiness. That's why of the species that are brought for the Bikurim, we mentioned, it has to be from the Shivas Haminim. It has to be a very special kind, which Eretz Yisrael was praised and enhanced with. Further, the time period when the Bikurim need to be brought is generally between Shavuos and Sukkot, during the harvest season. That is when a person, after all their toil and effort of plowing and working the tilling and working the field, and now finally they see the fruits of their labor, and they see it. They're able to enjoy and benefit from it. It is during that season when a person is supposed to bring the Bikurim. And Rashi brings that if a person didn't bring it at that point, it brings it at a subsequent period of time. You could bring, but you're not able to make the declaration that we spoke about before. Further, the Bikurim would only be brought once a year. Even if you had another crop and you left something out, there's only one time you bring the Bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash. You don't do it 2 times. Because generally, the concept of joy and happiness is typically revolving around a novelty, something that's new and different. That evokes a sense of joy and elation and jubilee. Something we know in life in general, as Chassidus brings a general axiom, tainug tmidi einay tainug, something that is constant, something that is very, very familiar, doesn't elicit that same reaction, that same joy. And therefore, it had to be something that was very unique, something that only happened once a year. Similar to we know we're approaching Rosh Hashanah, and there's this minhag to have the new fruit, the pri chadash, which we eat at the meal of the second night of Rosh Hashanah. And the reason for that is because since it's a whole discussion and debate halachically if we're allowed to make a shechiyanu by the kiddush, so therefore we have the new fruit because then, if halachically it's questionable as to the shechianu, we can associate that with the new fruit. But the new fruit is something that is only you haven't eaten from that fruit in an entire year, because only then you could say shechianu. You could feel that spontaneous sense of joy and happiness when there is that novelty. When something is not, when you don't have that shock value, when you become very familiar, something that becomes something that you see too often does not elicit that same sense of joy and happiness. If so, what we're seeing from all this is that the common denominator of all of these different features of Bikurim is that it needs to be done in a state of complete simcha, joy and happiness. And thus, Rashi says, when can you bring the Bikurim? You could only bring it when every single Jew has taken possession, has settled in their property, in their apportioned chelak in Eretz Yisrael. Because if you are sitting in your place, you're in the Galilee, you're enjoying the beautiful grapes that you have grown, and you're feeling good, but somehow you know that on the other side in the Negev, there's another Jew you never met, you don't know his name, you don't know anything about them, but you know that there are some Jews. It's only 2 years into the dividing period. You know it's many, many years still of working things out, and there's a Jew who is not settled, is not relaxed, hasn't found his space, he hasn't found his place where he could put his stuff down and be settled. Therefore, you may have it good. You have your vineyard, you're enjoying life, but you know there's another Jew that's not in a complete state of being settled. Therefore, your joy is not complete. If his joy is not complete, your joy is not complete. And if your joy is not complete, you cannot bring the Bikurim because you are not in a state of simcha. This is a very, very powerful idea, which really needs explanation, because we can understand that perhaps conceptually what we're talking about, but practically it seems like a standard that is beyond, or something that is too idealistic. How can we say that there's this person that you feel that someone else on the other side of the country, somehow his pain, his anxiety, that impacts you? It seems like a stretch. It seems like a utopian, unrealistic expectation. There is a story of this Hasidic Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Moshe Goldman of Zvil. He was known as the Zviller Rebbe, and he was, I believe, was in the 1920s, was arrested he was in Russia, and he was arrested for what they called in those days the counter-revolutionary activities, for spreading Yiddishkeit, observance of Torah and mitzvahs, and he was sent to Siberia for 7 years. And as we know, Siberia was not a picnic. It was not an easy life. Hard, back-breaking labor, unbearable conditions. And after some period of time, he was called in by the commander to his office, along with another person who was frail and feeble. And the commander says, "I have amazing news to tell you." He says, "What is that?" "Well, it's come down an order that you are to be released. Here are your discharge papers, and you just need to sign them." However, it was on a Shabbos, and this Rebbe, Rabbi Goldman, he's thinking to himself, on the one hand, Shabbos, pikuach nefesh, if it's a very serious life saving or threatening situation, person should, of course, preservation of life is the most paramount principle in Torah, and certainly in this condition, it's very, very serious. To be liberated, who knows how long he's going to be able to survive in this kind of place, he should sign the papers. But then he had another thought. He says, listen, he's thinking to himself, I'm still young, strong. This is not an extermination camp. It's a labor camp. I've survived till now. I could survive another few years. And maybe it's not pikuach nefesh. Maybe it's not of that such critical importance. And he tells the commander, because he had a suffix, he was in doubt, he didn't know what to do. He said, I'm sorry, I cannot sign this. And the commander is totally, he can't believe this. He's like, what? What are you talking about? And, you could stay, I'm going to make you stay in this camp for another few years. And he turns to the other guy, who is also a Jew, but wasn't religious. And he says, okay, sir, please sign these papers. Now, this person didn't really care much about religion. And on his own, he would probably sign these papers. But now he sees this rabbi who's taking a principled stance. He was very, very impressed by that. And it really touched a chord. And of course, he was also felt somewhat uncomfortable to sign the papers now after this Rebbe made this grand stand. And he said, I also will not be signing these papers. And now the commander is really getting mad. He's about to do something crazy. All of a sudden, this Rabbi Goldman, steps up and he says, for him, I will sign the papers. So the commander says, what? What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. You just said it's your holy Sabbath and you have this principle and you're not going to sign. So the rabbi said, listen, for myself, I'm young, relatively, I'm strong, I'm okay. I'm not so sure I'm allowed to desecrate my Shabbos. However, this man is old and he's not well. And for him to stay any longer is literally sakanas nefashis. It is of mortal danger. And therefore, for him, it's a mitzvah to sign. I'm willing to do that. When the commander saw this, he was so overawed and so impressed. He says, you know what? Listen, guys. You sit tight. I will sign on your behalf for both of you. I'm going to sign and you're going to go free. The concept of Ahavas Yisrael, having love for another Jew, was something that was mentioned in the Torah, it's in the Parsha of Kedoshim, for thousands of years. And people always perhaps took it for granted. Love another Jew as yourself. But it really never, to digest this idea and to understand it 100% is something, was always very, very hard to digest, because how can you truly love another person like yourself? You love yourself, your family. How can you care about another person, and certainly a Jew that you don't know, you never met, to love them just like yourself? As it happens, the Parsha of Savo is typically read on or in proximity to a very special day in the Hasidic calendar, and that is the day known as Chai Elul, the 18th of Elul. On this day, the two great luminaries of Hasidus, the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of the Hasidic movement, and the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, were born on the 18th of Elul. One of the chief ideas that the Hasidus movement espoused and taught really highlighted and accentuated the concept of Ahavas Yisrael. It was through the teaching of Hasidus, its methodology, its philosophy, it really cast a new light and a whole new appreciation as to what it means to really love another Jew and how it's truly possible, how it's something that we can actually achieve. Because until that point, we were often looking at things in their externalities. We look at the veneer of life, and every person is differentiated, individualistic, unique, and different. It was very, very hard to conceive, to fathom how we can truly coalesce and unite as one. What Hasidus did was to look beyond the facade, to look beyond the externalities. Because, as Hasidus taught, we know everything in life, especially people, are comprised of a neshama, of a soul, and a guf, of a body. And true, from the body perspective, there's fragmentation, there's disparity, there's plurality. But once we go to the level of the neshama, when we look at the soul of everything, on the soul level, there's unity. Everything is one. The Alter Rebbe explains in his Tanya, he explains in the 32nd chapter about the concept of Avas Yisrael. And he says, true, when you look at people, they all look different and everyone has their shtick, so to speak. Everyone has their idiosyncrasies. Everyone has their agendas, their biases. But what is about the soul? The true core of every single person. All of us, have a neshama, which stems from one core, from one reality. It is the neshama, the chelek elukam imal mamash, the fragment, the piece of Hashem Himself, which is vested in every single person. That neshama, all neshamas, they come from one place. It constitutes one entity. And therefore, once we delve beneath all the superficialities of life, we start to realize that there is one reality that encompasses everything. Chassidus highlights the idea of Achdus Hashem, the concept of the unity, the absolute unity of Hashem. That is one of the core teachings you read about in all the Chassidic writings that keep on encouraging us to think and meditate and reflect on this reality. That we look around the world and we see dichotomy, we see plurality. But the truth is, these are merely projections of a unified, solitary, one organic reality, which is Hashem. At the core of everything, there's only Hashem. So the more we delve deeper and probe the essence of everything in life, the more we come to realize how everything is integrated, how everything is really one. How does that help Avas Yisrael? Because the truth is, it actually starts the other way around. It's not about how do I come to love another Jew. The real question is, can you come to love yourself? In life, we are often obsessing about the things that we have. Whether it's our material acquisitions, our home, our car, it could be our career, our ambitions. If indeed that's what we are in love with, and that is what we cherish and value, so of course, I want the best for myself. I want to enhance and enrich my life as much as possible. It's selfish and narcissistic. Certainly, I cannot really jive with another person because our interests will inevitably be mutually exclusive. However, if what I really love is not my externalities, what I really love is my soul. I love the purity, the depth, which is on the inside. I am in love with the light, the neshama, the mission that was given to me in life. So from that vantage point, my soul, my friend's soul, every single Jew, whoever it may be, we are all one. All of these various sparks which are vested in all these different millions of bodies, they are actually inherently really one. And the challenge of life is to be able to peel away all of these layers and to be able to go deeper and deeper to see how, where we see all this confusion and chaos in life, when we go beneath those layers, we see how it's really inherently and innately connected. So what did Chassidus teach us? It taught us many things. But one of the ideas it taught us was this concept of unity, of Achdus. This shed light on one of the fundamental principles, one of the fundamental pillars of Torah, the concept of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zebazeh, how all Jews are mutually responsible one for the other. It's not just a theoretical a theoretical concept, a beautiful idea. We're all guarantors one for the other. It's a fact of life. it manifests in a halachic reality. A person is allowed to make kiddush for another person. You may have made kiddush already on Shabbos, but there's another person who didn't hear kiddush, or another mitzvah. And you're allowed to make kiddush for them. You make a bracha, and you recite the kiddush. Why is that? You say, Asher kitshanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu, you say, Hashem, you commanded us, you sanctified us, and you commanded us with this mitzvah. Well, I already fulfilled my mitzvah. How can I discharge another person of their mitzvah? The answer is because Kol Yisrael Arevim Zabeza, all Jews are responsible for another. And so long as there is that one Jew who has not fulfilled their mitzvah, it's as if I did not fulfill my mitzvah. All Jews are like now one body with different limbs. And therefore, when that person is lacking or missing, I am missing and lacking as well. It's the famous medrash that's brought about which is the metaphor of the person who bought a ticket to go on the boat and was expecting a first-class, beautiful waterfront window cabin that he'd be able to get the beautiful view of the entire ocean on his cruise. And much to his dismay, he was given a bunker with no windows, and this person is really, really angry. And he says, you know what? I am going to get my waterfront view. I paid, I have my ticket, and I'm going to get it. And he takes his drill and starts drilling a hole. And all of a sudden, the captain is notified. He comes down, he says, what are you doing? He says, well, I bought my ticket. I want to be able to see the water. So I'm going to drill this hole, and I'm going to see the water right from my room. And the captain says, hang on a second, you can't do that. He says, why not? It's my ticket. It's my seat. It's my room. I can do whatever I want. He says, true, you have a ticket. You have a room. But don't you realize that you're drilling this hole? It's not just going to affect you. The entire ship is going to sink. What Chassidus teaches us is how once we study and reflect and work on ourselves in our service of Hashem, we come to appreciate that all of these barriers, all these divisions that we perceive are just something that we perceive on the outside. It's something that is not a true barrier. It doesn't really exist. The truth of life is we study and come to appreciate that there is this unified theory. There's this string that attaches all of us together. And it's not just we talk about the unity of Hashem. Hashem is one. If Hashem is one, what does that mean? That we are one. Because our essence is our part of Hashem, our neshama. So if Hashem is one, we are one. And these ideas were taught and inspired by the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the Alter Rebbe, through their teachings, through their stories, through their nigunim, through their songs. They inspired generations of people to have this appreciation. And thus, this idea of Avos Yisrael, the Rebbe says, is clearly highlighted in this week's Parsha. There has to be that organic connection between Chai Elul and the Parsha of Ki Savo. Because in the Parsha of Ki Savo, when we read about the story of the Bikurim, where there's a Jew who is living pretty, has their vineyard, has their life all set, but he will be perceived as an ingrate, as a person who's not appreciative of all the good things he has in life, because he will not go ahead and bring Bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash because he doesn't feel complete, because there's another Jew somewhere else who financially has an anxiety, has uncertainty in their life. And therefore, that person's problems is his problems. Only when that person is successful could I feel successful. If that person is failing, is feeling down, that failure reflects in my life as well. There's a story I read about, it was a couple years ago in Israel. There was this Kala who was about to get married, and she had there's this ring that was worth about $8,000-9,000, like 30,000-40,000 shekel. And it was lost. was in this neighborhood, I believe it was Givat Shol, somewhere like that, and it got lost. Apparently, it fell into the garbage, and they were searching, they were looking, and they couldn't find it, and they realized that the garbage was taken away. So they ran down to the municipality, and they asked them if they could get a hold of that garbage truck, so they'd be able to sift through all that stuff, and they were able to work out an arrangement where they would bring the truck to one of these warehouses to dump not just their garbage can, but the entire neighborhood's garbage and sift through it. And they posted signs in the neighborhood. There's a Kala missing her diamond, her wedding ring, and if anyone could come and help to look for it. Anyways, the next day when they showed up to look for the garbage, there were dozens of volunteers who were all there together, sifting through refuse, through garbage, to look for the ring. It was an unbelievable display of unity, of volunteerism, that amazing spirit of Mi Kamcha Yisrael. But unfortunately, the diamond was nowhere to be found. There was a diamond jeweler who heard about this story, and he was so heartened by this that he said, I'm willing to give a brand new diamond to this Kala free of charge. Also amazing. This is also incredible. But the story doesn't stop there. It was a few days later, there was this man who was walking down one of the alleyways in the neighborhood, and all of a sudden he sees near the garbage, there's this ring. There's no markings, there's no name. But of course, when a Jew finds something on the floor, they know there's the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, but he didn't know whose it was. But it happened to be a couple days later at a Shabbos meal, there was this amazing story that people were talking about, how a whole neighborhood was scouring through the dumpsters and the garbage trucks to find a missing ring of the Kala. And of course they put two and two together, and he realized that he indeed had found the ring. And he brought it, and Kala was reunited with her ring. This is something that it's not just about explaining about a concept of Avos Yisrael. It's something that we, as Jewish people, truly feel that the welfare, the success of another person is not just their success, their failures. We are very much integrated to the extent that the well-being of another person is critical. It's fundamental to everything that happens. And if that person is winning, I am winning, which is very, very hard for some people to understand. How can you forgive? How can you appreciate or tolerate another person's success? But if you truly reflect and meditate upon the fact that we are truly one, would a person say that I don't want my right hand to do any better than my left hand? We are all one. And when that person is doing something good and positive, that actually helps my life, my well-being as well. So this is the explanation of the opinion of Rashi. But we need to understand the opinion of the Sifri. Circling back, which the Sifri says, when should you say thank you? Right away, when you enter Eretz Yisrael. So now, it is Rashi that makes sense, because the complete state of joy and happiness is after the 14 years. And yet, the Sifri says, say thank you right away. The Rebbe explains that in life, and the way it's reflected in Jewish tradition, there's two kinds of thank yous. There's a thank you when someone does something for you that could be immediate, spontaneous. Then there's the kind of thank you that comes after time. We begin to develop an appreciation, an understanding for all the good things that we have in life. And it is after that reflection, it is after that meditation, we say thank you. The Rebbe said in the Jewish tradition, what is the first thing a Jew needs to do in the morning? When you wake up, you say Modeh. It's right away in the first thing in the morning, before you get out of bed, before you even wash Netilat Yadayim, before washing your hands, dispel the forces of impurity, it is the first thing you do. You don't even know what are you saying thank you for. But every Jew has that faith, has that emunah, that you know that you woke up this morning, it's only because of Hashem's kindness. As we say, Shechazarta bi nishmasi bechemla rabba munasecha, that Hashem has such kindness and compassion, and He gave us another chance. He renewed our lease on life, and here we are for another day. So at this point, we don't exactly know. We don't even have time to make all these deliberations and calculations what we're thankful for, but we do it right away. The first thing in the morning, we say thank you. But as time goes on, we get up, we wash up, then we daven. And we start with the prayers. We reflect on the kindness of Hashem, His wondrous creation. Hodu Hashem kiru v'shmo. We praise Hashem. Throughout the davening, about the marvelous, unbelievable, complex world that He made that is so magnificent and spectacular. Throughout the davening, until we conclude, Ach tzadikim yodu l'shmecha. There's again praise. So the whole davening is an exercise in praise of Hashem. But clearly, this is a lot more of an elaborate, thought out thank you. Ultimately, these two kinds of thank yous, each one has an advantage, because there's something to be said about the immediate thank you. As soon as you get something, you right away show your appreciation, your thankfulness for what you've received. It's spontaneous, it's very quick, and it comes from a very, very deep part of the person. But yet, the person doesn't appreciate the full context, the full understanding of what has been done, why it has been done, how much has it impacted my life, how has it changed me. When you do that the thank you later in the day, it is a lot more compelling. And the person who you are thanking says, oh, this person really understands, really appreciates what I have done for them. And therefore, the Sifri and Rashi, you could say that each one encompasses a different kind of thank you. The Sifri is saying, you got the Bikurim, say thank you right away. Yes, later in the day, later in time, you'll appreciate things more, but say thank you. Rashi says, hang on, we can't say thank you right away. My thank you is not going to be complete. It's not going to be total. It's not going to be all-encompassing. As we said before, there's many, many people that are not feeling it. So I'm feeling deficient. I'm lacking in my appreciation. I'm going to wait until my thank you is complete. Sometimes people, when they give a gift, they want it to be perfect. They want it to be right. They don't want to just shoot from the hip. So they said, let me wait a little time till it's more perfected, it's more complete of a package. That's the opinion of Rashi. And the truth is, the Rebbe says, you could say that both of these perspectives were not mutually exclusive, because initially, if the spies did not sin, we find in the Parsha of Chukas, when Moshe Rabbeinu sent the second set of spies, they didn't just go on a reconnaissance mission, they actually conquered the cities right away. And Rashi says the same thing could have been in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, when he sent, in the times of the Meraglim, when Moshe Rabbeinu said the first set of spies, if they wouldn't have sinned, there would be no need for the subsequent conquering. They could have gone and conquered the land right away. So the Rebbe says, in a perfect world, the Sifri and Rashi could have happened, because if the spies didn't sin, they would have entered the land right away without needing to conquer it. And indeed, when Mashiach comes, we will have that, because there will be no need to conquer and spend all these years of dividing. Immediately, we will enter the land. We will have the Bikurim. And then we will have both the miyad, we will have the spontaneity, the excitement, the enthusiasm of the Sifri, as well as the depth and the completeness which Rashi advances in his opinion. So may it be Hashem's will that it's in the month of Elul, as we prepare ourselves for Rosh Hashanah, and we ask Hashem for all of the blessings for Hashanah Tov Mesukkah, we know that the greatest blessing is Barcheinu Avinu Kulanu Ke'echad. When we feel that unity, when we start to look at the commonality and how each and every one of us, we empathize with the plight of another person and we feel their challenges, their troubles, their tribulations in life, and we do all we can. It is through these blessings and with the energy and the perspective of the teachings of Chassidus from Chai Elul, it will give us a Chai Elul, a true energy, a true Chayas, a true shot in the arm. For each and every one of us, we should have a Ksivach Simatova, be inscribed for a healthy year, a happy year, a sweet year, for health, happiness, and all the brachas that we ask for.